I am yours, I am yours, I am yours. Send me, Lord, I am yours.
Welcome to the Gospel Centered Pro-Life Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to minister to people coming to an abortion center that are not necessarily abortion-minded. We know this episode will encourage and equip you, so stay tuned.
Send me, Lord. I felt your passion, I've touched your heart.
Use me, Lord, use me, Lord.
Welcome to the Gospel Centered Pro-Life Podcast. We appreciate you guys listening, and as always, encourage you guys to share this podcast. It's mainly focused on equipping people and encouraging people who are out on the sidewalk, but we cover other subjects that don't necessarily have to do with sidewalk counseling ministry. So I think it'd be a blessing to a lot of people, but in particular, people that are reaching out on the sidewalks of their local abortion center or people that are praying about reaching out at their local abortion center. I want to mention that just this past Saturday, we're recording on a Monday, February the 8th.
I think so.
Right? And you guys should hear this the Thursday. That's how it typically works. We record on a Monday and we put them out on a Thursday morning.
Yeah.
This past Saturday, February the 6th, we did an online training, what we call a Sidewalks 101 training, which we made available to anybody who heard about it, which we didn't really invite a lot of people. We didn't really share a lot with a lot of people that we were going to be doing this. We had a large group of people.
Yeah.
We were doing some online training. Maybe you're interested in that. We were doing, again, what we call our 101 training, which is just basic how-to of sidewalk counseling. Actually, we cover the what, why, and how of sidewalk outreach ministries, sidewalk counseling. And maybe you're interested in that. Maybe listening to these podcasts has gotten you interested in going out and you want to get equipped. We do that the first Saturday of every month. We'll be doing that moving forward at Eastern Time, 2 to 4. And you'd have to fill out an application and us give you the thumbs up on your application for you to be able to be on that training, and then we'll send you the link. But if you're interested in that at all, you can go to lovelife.org/America, and there's some ways to get involved. You could even reach out to me if you wanted to, Daniel@lovelife.org, and I can give you the information that you need and get you to the appropriate places to sign up and all of that. But just wanted to let you guys know that's available. That's what we're trying our best to do with this podcast, trying our best to do with Love Life America and all of that, is to train and equip people to be a gospel-centered witness at their local abortion center. That's what we're trying to do. And hopefully that's what this podcast will try to do. It's a little different. Normally we deal with how do you talk to an abortion-minded mom at an abortion center?
Right. That's our focus.
That's our main focus.
Yeah.
But we do know, the Latrobe Abortion Center that you guys have heard us talk about a lot is what we would consider an abortion mill. Mm-hmm. They just do abortions. That's all they do. That's on their website. That's all they're offering is abortion. And there's a lot of those freestanding abortion clinics around the country that all they do is abortion. But there are also a lot of abortion clinics that do other things, and a lot of those abortion clinics are Planned Parenthoods.
Right.
Planned Parenthoods, even though their bread and butter, for lack of a better term, is abortion. That's how they make their money. Mm-hmm. They do other things, offer birth control. They do hormone therapy. We're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
They do STD testing and stuff. Mm-hmm. The stuff they offer, however, though, is stuff that you can get in other places. Right. So it's not like Planned Parenthood is necessary because they offer these other things. I mean, you hear people saying, Planned Parenthood, They do more than just abortions. As a matter of fact, I think they say statistically only 3% of what they do is abortion, right? Mm-hmm. So that makes them like mostly good, right?
Right.
But my response to that is always, well, let me cook you a pan of brownies made with the best chocolate and just put 3% dog poop in there. Would you still eat the brownies? Would you still encourage your friends to eat the brownies?
Yeah.
Probably not, right?
I like to say, and Hitler was a great guy, except for that thing about the Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was mostly just trying to do the best thing for his country, and only 3% of what he did was kill Jews in gas chambers. So
right, yeah.
That's ridiculous.
He didn't put a whole lot of time into that.
Yeah. Or like maybe our mostly peaceful protests that we've had around the country where people burn and loot and riot.
Yeah.
They're mostly peaceful. Only 3% of it is them bashing storefronts in with bricks and things like that. The bad far overcomes the whatever apparent good that might be
when it's that bad, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, not to rabbit trail on that, let's jump in to what we're talking about.
Okay.
Again, we're talking about you're at a Planned Parenthood or at an abortion center. You want to reach the moms going in that are having abortions,
Right.
but there's other people. There's
Yeah.
people coming in. There's a lady walking in says, I'm here for birth control.
Yeah.
Or there's a person walking in saying, I'm here for STD testing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for an ultrasound because they do it cheaper here than anywhere else.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that? So we're
Yeah.
going to touch a couple of those subjects and just talk about how we respond in the best ways to minister to people in that capacity.
Yeah, right. So yeah. The main groups, and we know this because we're ministering at a Planned Parenthood now. There are 4 abortion centers in our city, and we are at all of them. And one of those is a Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of different groups going in. And so the main groups, we tried to kind of just break it down so that as we talk about it, you can think about, okay, these are the main groups. How can we reach them, or at least be somewhat knowledgeable
Yeah.
about each of those groups so that we can speak to them. And all of these groups need the Lord, and most of these groups are people that are going to be abortion vulnerable.
Yeah.
If they are not, they're already abortion vulnerable. So if we can speak knowledgeably to them, we might be able to stop abortion before it's ever, been considered.
One of the things that Planned Parenthood does is they try to get into communities and they offer things, like sex education,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is ridiculous. Getting sex education from an abortion provider is
Right.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they try to sow their seeds into the community so that when a woman does get in a, quote, unwanted pregnancy situation, where does she go? She goes to Planned Parenthood.
Exactly.
So we always, in any of these situations, want to deter people from going into Planned Parenthood because
Right.
they're trying to build relationships with people. And one of the things we've discovered locally, just to mention this, because there's this idea that Planned Parenthood is needed because they offer free stuff.
Right.
We had a lady call not too long ago, the Planned Parenthood here locally, and this has happened nationally. People have called Planned Parenthood and figured out, okay, what do they offer that's actually free? And almost nothing is free. They're not giving free ultrasounds.
Right.
They're not giving free pregnancy testing.
Yeah.
They're not doing free birth control
Yeah.
or free STD testing. None of this stuff is free.
Right. Yeah.
And so we do want to deter people from going in there who come with these different things that are not
Right.
necessarily coming for an abortion.
Right. Yeah. So we talk about each of these areas, and just to kind of organize it for you, the main areas that we see at our local Planned Parenthood, and probably at most Planned Parenthood, people coming for birth control or problems with birth control.
Yeah.
Abortion workers. Now, they aren't coming to Planned Parenthood, but you see them. They're a group that you'll see going in and out.
Yeah.
The women coming for low-cost pregnancy tests or ultrasounds. The women coming for pap smear, STD testing, or other health issues. Not mammograms, because they don't do mammograms.
They don't.
Even
Don't care
though
how much people say they do.
they
do not do them.
They do not. And then the latest group that and that's one that we're going to do a teeny little case study on, because it really took me kind of by surprise. I wasn't expecting, and I didn't know how to deal with it, were men coming for hormone therapy for transgender transition.
Yeah.
And that we kept seeing these men going in to Planned Parenthood alone, coming out alone, never apparently meeting women. And it took us a while to figure out, oh, they're here for hormone therapy.
Yeah.
So not that our wheelhouse is the abortion-minded women.
Sure.
We know how to deal with an abortion-minded woman. That's the focus of our ministry. But I think it is important that we know what to say and do with these other groups.
Yeah, and I think also to we know how to minister to these groups without letting them be all-consuming, right? So that's one thing
Yeah.
you need to be aware of is that the enemy of the best is always the good. So is it good to minister to someone who thinks that they're a woman when they're really a man? Yeah, it's good to minister the truth to them. It's good to show them the truth of God's word and to minister the love of Jesus to them. But what's the best? Well, if someone's walking past them that's there to kill their child, continuing in a lengthy conversation with them and neglecting to give a voice to that baby, you'd be sacrificing the good for the best, I believe, in that situation.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about how you can answer these situations, but also to keep your focus on why you're actually there.
Yeah, and your focus is always the abortion-minded women. So,
Yeah.
so we had a case last week at Planned Parenthood of a young lady that I won't make this too lengthy, but we found out that she was there for an IUD removal. I
Yeah.
actually didn't know Planned Parenthood did that. So it was interesting to know that they did. They will remove the IUD. But we called out to the women not knowing that. And that's always our strategy. So with all these groups, we would start off calling out if you're here for an abortion.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a friend that you could talk to this about, but we are here to offer you hope and help. So we always start that way. And oftentimes they'll tell us, I'm not here for an abortion. Sometimes we discovered that that was a lie, but sometimes we discover it was the truth. And that was the case with this young lady last week. She was not there for an abortion. She did tell us she was having birth control removed. I kind of forgot that. Because so many people go in and out, and we're calling out to so many people. So she was in there for a while, and then I saw this woman come out. It was her, but I had forgotten the discussion I'd had with her car side, and she's weeping.
Yeah.
And I just kept calling out, saying, you're obviously upset. I know whatever you face, we can help you. And she finally came over to me, just bawling,
Yeah.
crying her eyes out. And the first thing I did, actually, even in the COVID era, I probably shouldn't have, but was hugged her because this was a young lady, you know what, probably just out of teenhood and just so upset. And she's crying and said and she's, by the way, it was frigid out, 20 degrees, and she's wearing a T-shirt and flip-flops with no socks, no winter coat, nothing.
Wow.
And she said she was late for her appointment for the IUD to be removed. And they wouldn't do it because she was late.
Wow.
And so she's standing in the cold, frigid, obviously doesn't own winter clothes, obviously
What is it?
poor.
Planned Parenthood care no matter what, unless you're
Yeah.
late for your appointment.
Yeah, well, that was the irony, too, is we had just, right before we saw that woman, we were commenting, my counselor friend and I, about the Planned Parenthood sign that says, Planned Parenthood cares, no matter what. I took a picture of it, and I said, really?
Yeah.
Well, no matter, I guess if you're late for your appointment,
Yeah.
then they no longer care.
They no longer care.
So the no matter what was probably a little bit of an exaggeration
I
on
would
Planned
say.
Parenthood's part. But anyway, we said, fortunately, I was standing there with a fellow, my fellow counselor is a doctor, and she said, the woman said, I'm having pain. I'm in pain. So not only was she late for the appointment, she told them she's in pain, and it sounds like it was the IUD. And so some principles kind of in dealing with her was, first of all, find out the problem. We found out the problem. She's in pain,
Yeah.
possibly emergency pain. And our doctor friend said, well, you need to get to the ER, which
Yeah.
is literally 5 minutes away. And then the doctor drove her there.
Yeah.
Actually took her to the ER. But and then we even gave her a sweatshirt, just said keep it for this poor woman. But we know now there are going to be women who are getting birth control. We know that. We
Yeah.
knew people come to get birth control. But there's also people having an IUD. Either, I don't know if they put in IUDs. My guess is they do, but
Yeah.
they certainly remove the IUDs, but they just wouldn't for this one.
Yeah.
So there are kind of some principles we can think about in dealing with that. Again, we don't want to spend a lot of time, but one of the things that did occur to me right away was this young lady, young, unmarried, on birth control. Well, she's clearly not following God in terms of sexual purity.
Yeah.
So having that gospel discussion is always important.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has got to be done, forthright, but a gracious way. We're
Right.
not just coming across as condemning. Well,
Yeah.
you should be having birth control because you're a fornicator.
Yeah, right.
There's a nice way to say that.
Yeah.
We need to bring God's truth into the equation. God's truth is best always, no matter what modern society says. And so, yeah, talking about that. And of course, I believe this is more appropriately a woman-to-woman discussion.
Yeah.
Although, as a man, as a pastor, I can certainly address things in that level.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you got to address that issue
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, and when someone is broken, we never want to heap sorrow upon sorrow. You
Yeah,
have said that, and I
absolutely.
think that that's really, really good advice. But the flip side of that is when someone is broken, they know they're broken. They know that they are in a terrible mess, and they're receptive
Yeah.
to, hey, how do I not get in this mess again? And that was where we were able to start with her.
Sure.
And we gave her a sweatshirt and a ride to the hospital. So she was open to hearing what these kind people had to say about God.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But there are other, there certainly are other things that we offered her and that we could offer to anyone
Yeah.
in those situations. So, first of all, letting them know that birth control that is given by Planned Parenthood can often cause abortions.
Yeah.
And many people don't know that.
Yeah.
So educating the people coming in, because some of them, as they're walking in, that's all they're there for. They're just there for birth control. And that's one of the things you can call out. Did you know that this place does abortions? They almost always say yes. And then so something else that you can offer is community health centers
Yeah.
that do that service, less expensively.
Yeah. And, I will mention if I'm at a Planned Parenthood and I'm having a conversation with a mom or a dad going in, and they'll say oftentimes, well, I'm not here for that.
Right.
They want to distance themselves from abortion.
Yeah, they do.
And
They're
so I'll
ashamed.
ask them, if I can pick up
Right.
on that, I'll ask them, so what do you think about the fact that Planned Parenthood does abortions? And oftentimes they'll say, well, I don't like it. And I will actually give them the analogy that I just gave you guys at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I'll say, well, what if I offered you a pan of brownies that, I just cooked up real nice and used the best chocolate I could, but I mixed a little bit of dog poop in it. Would you eat them?
Yeah.
And of course, they're going to say, no way. I'll say, that's Planned Parenthood, except it's even worse. Yeah, they're doing other things for you at a low cost, but they're killing babies inside of that place.
Yeah.
And you don't really want to have any association with that, do you?
Yeah.
And then I will point them to a pregnancy center that can oftentimes do everything that Planned Parenthood is offering, except for a whole lot cheaper.
Right.
And the question might be, well, why didn't they go there in the first place? Well, a lot of times because they don't hear about it.
That's
Pregnancy centers have a hard time competing. I mean, pregnancy centers are nonprofit, locally supported organizations normally.
Yeah.
And thank God, for the fact that churches and individuals support them, but for them to bring in enough money to compete with Planned Parenthood in the Google space is like almost impossible.
Right,
Because
right.
Planned Parenthood is pouring, I don't know, probably nationally, millions of dollars into Google, maybe even every month.
Yeah.
To get those words that like free pregnancy tests and ultrasound and that stuff, to get those keywords as for their links to pop up when people search those
Yeah.
keywords.
Yeah.
So a lot of these women don't know about the pregnancy centers.
They don't. And now the pregnancy centers, many of them are Christian, and many of them do not provide birth control counseling or birth control.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so good to have as big a list as you can have of low-cost community centers, because they will provide birth control. And we probably should do at some point a podcast about birth control. There
Yeah.
are so many different feelings about it. For sure, we would not support the pill because it can cause abortion, or the IUD. Both of
Yeah.
those can, but there are other forms of birth control, and there are community resource centers that will provide that. Other community health centers
Yeah.
that will provide that. So knowing those and offering those is a way to deal with these women that are going in. And your point that I love telling them the story that you tell them, because it makes it real.
Yeah.
But also, almost all of them say, really, there's other places where we could go, and we give out 20 pieces of literature when we're there,
Yeah.
because they want to know there are other low cost. There are people that go to Planned Parenthood because there's just nothing else
Yeah.
available for them. So anyway, the second group that we see out there, the abortion workers,
Yeah.
and those aren't moms going in and out or men going in and out, but it's people who work there.
Yeah.
And what do we do with them? What can we call out to them?
Yeah. So, of course, you have that at every abortion center, not just at
Right.
Planned Parenthood.
That's right.
These, we certainly deal with abortion workers here at the Latrobe Abortion Center. And again, they're not a priority for us.
Right.
It's not that God doesn't love them equally. He loves them just like he loves the moms going in.
Yeah.
But for the moms and the babies that they carry, it's like 911 emergency. Like there's a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And certainly for these abortion workers, there's this, at least in some measure, a sense of urgency that they need to get out of this industry, or they become more and more engulfed in this spirit of death.
Right.
But some of the things, of course, we'll call out to them is, I always will say, God's made you for so much more than this.
Ooh, that's a good line.
That's one of the things
Yeah.
that I will say. God has given you the skills as a nurse. I'll say this to the doctors as well. God has given you the skills as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're using those skills to destroy life rather than to protect life.
Mm-hmm.
God has so much more for you than this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you want to sting their conscience
Yeah.
and not back away from the fact that abortion is murder. And so I will warn them, if you take part in the shedding of innocent blood, the Bible says that you will reap what you sow. And just call them to repent. Stop
Yeah.
taking part in what's going on inside of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as a resource, we will point them to abortionworker.com. We don't have the manpower and really the calling and the focus to be able to get them a job. And we have helped some local abortion workers get better jobs and things like that. We've
Right.
seen, 26 over the past 2 years or so as Love Life. I think locally we've seen 18 to maybe 20.
Yeah, and those are the ones that contact us.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty that have left, we're sure, that haven't contacted us.
Yeah. We
But, yeah.
actually are friends with one of the ladies that used to run the front desk. And she's started a catering business and
Yeah.
has
And we
catered.
use her.
Yeah, she's catered some of our meetings. It's
Right.
been really
Yeah.
cool. But
Yeah.
we want to point them toward, if we can get them local resources, but if we can't, we point them to abortionworker.com, who has
Yeah.
a program to get these folks, mostly women, out of the abortion industry.
Right.
And so we call that out. We have actually little business cards that say abortionworker.com on them. Hand them to them if we're able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we deal with that.
Yeah, and we've had abortion workers leave on. It's not common, but they'll leave and come to us in tears, saying, "I have to leave this place," and we'll hand them the card. And that's Abby Johnson's ministry, a former Planned Parenthood manager, and it is they know what they're doing with the abortion workers. So we kind of touched on this a little bit. Women coming for low cost pregnancy test or ultrasounds. I do want to point out. And then what you talked about with the pregnancy resource centers, that's the perfect resource to point them to.
Yeah.
And they're lower on the list if you Google. The first
absolutely.
hit is going to be Planned Parenthood or an abortion center. And I know for a fact, because I've talked with the women at coming out of the Latrobe Abortion Center, that they are lured in there by free pregnancy tests. And what they've told me is that, yes, the pregnancy test is free, but if you want the results, you have to pay $15.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how deceptive
It
is
is.
that? And the ultrasounds at now I don't know what Planned Parenthood charges, but at Latrobe facility they say the ultrasounds are free
Yeah.
if you get the abortion.
Yeah.
But if you don't get the abortion, then you pay a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But they don't tell you that.
Yeah.
But they lure them in, and don't tell them what really the bottom line is. This is only it's free only if you do.
Yeah,
the
and how that
abortion.
basically works is when a woman comes into the abortion center, she checks in. What's the first thing they ask for? They want your ID and your form of payment.
Right.
And they're asking her, say, what procedure are you, how far along are you?
Right.
And then what procedure are you considering? If they say something like, well, I'm not exactly sure if I want to go through with the abortion or not, I want to get the ultrasound first, then they'll get them to go ahead and pay $185 because they have to have blood work and an ultrasound. Take them back for the ultrasound. And if they are saying, well, I'm not sure I want to do this, then they say, well, you've already paid $185 and we can't refund that. So all you have to pay is another, $215, $300, whatever dollars. And we can go ahead and take care of this.
Right.
They get that hook in them.
Yeah.
And because they're a business that makes money off of killing children, they convince women who are not completely sure that they want to have an abortion. This notion that people come to an abortion center and they already have their minds made up is such a false notion.
It is.
So untrue.
Yeah.
And so, again, they try to get their hook in them. They
Yeah.
bring them in with this free or low-cost ultrasound. And in comparison, it is pretty low cost. $185 is pretty cheap compared to going to an OB doctor where it's like, I don't know, $300-$400.
Yeah. but there's free ones through us at our mobile ultrasound unit or through local pregnancy resource centers. The pregnancy test and the ultrasound is free.
Yeah.
And it astonishes me that so many women don't know that, but they don't. So offering that. And again, if they're there, if they're low income, unmarried, which many of them are, and they're coming for low-cost pregnancy test or an ultrasound, they're abortion vulnerable.
Yeah.
No matter where you are, they are abortion vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so sharing the gospel, again, always something that even these people that aren't there for an abortion now, we'll always give them the literature.
Yeah.
And the way that we kind of gently suggest that they take that literature is maybe you have a friend or you will have a friend one day who is considering abortion. And it would just be good. Our name and number is on this, and you've got the information.
Yeah.
So we deal with them actually not all that differently from the women coming in for an abortion. We still get them information. We still try to share sexual purity message in the gospel, and then we point them to local resources that don't kill babies.
Yeah. That's why it's good to have, like we have on our brochures, on the back of our brochure, a list of local pregnancy centers.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, and you've got some literature that you hand out, then make a list of local pregnancy centers.
Yeah.
Do them on, just regular old paper, print it out on your printer if you
Right,
have to, and
right.
slip it in your literature.
Yeah.
Make up stickers. I mean, there's so many things out there. Vistaprint, you can print stuff really cheap on Vistaprint.
Yeah.
Make up something that looks good as
Yeah.
a sticker, stick it on the back of your literature. Make up something, a card or something that
Yeah.
you can hand them to. And I would suggest, actually, if there's a pregnancy center not far from the Planned Parenthood or wherever you're reaching out at,
Mm-hmm.
just make up a card. This is what actually Elijah has at the Wendover Abortion Center,
Mm-hmm.
because the mobile unit, the Wendover Clinic is not far from the Latrobe Clinic, and we have the mobile unit at the Latrobe Clinic.
Right.
He just made up a card that has a map that shows them how to get here with directions on the bottom, written out directions, but also a map that shows them how to get here to the mobile unit, not to the
Yeah.
abortion clinic, but to the mobile unit.
Mm-hmm.
English on one side, Spanish on the other side. Hey, there's a mobile unit that will give you a free ultrasound pregnancy test 5 minutes away from here, or however far it is away for you guys, and hand it to them.
Yeah.
And turn them away from
Yeah.
that place.
Yeah, and another piece of good practical advice is if you've got someone who is there for an ultrasound and they tell you they're only for an ultrasound, then to offer to call while they're standing in front of you, call a pregnancy resource center, because then you keep, the more you can keep them from going in that place that also does abortions, the better off for the baby and for that woman.
Yeah.
So, and if you call a pregnancy resource center and say, I am standing in front of an abortion center, you've just cued them in. This is someone who is abortion vulnerable, and they will often move mountains to get them in there quickly.
Yeah.
So,
And this, I think, is a point that needs to be made also as kind of a side note, that building, if you're going to be out at an abortion center, building a good relationship with your local pregnancy center is really important.
yeah.
We can probably do a podcast about pregnancy centers and some of the differences, because there certainly are some differences depending
Yeah.
on the pregnancy center. I know I did a podcast interview with Tara Quinn,
Right.
who's with Help Pregnancy Center that we partner with here locally, who's just awesome.
They're very unusual.
Yeah,
They are
they're
really
unusual in the
wonderful.
pregnancy center world
Yeah,
in
they are.
that they're a little more forthright about abortion being murder, but they do it in a gracious way, a little more forthright with the gospel
Yeah.
than some are.
Yeah.
And so, again, we could probably do a whole podcast about some of the differences and some of the things that you need to be aware of, but still yet, building that relationship with your local pregnancy center is important. And let's say, because I've heard from a lot of people, well, they don't share the gospel. Or they, whatever. Well, if they don't share the gospel, you don't do ultrasounds, right?
Right.
You know?
Yep.
Well, you share the gospel. Then.
Yeah.
If you're going to point a woman in that direction, then get her phone number, get her contact info,
Right.
follow up with her. You share the gospel then.
Yeah.
And let them do the ultrasound. Let them do the ultrasound stuff, the medical stuff.
Yeah.
And you do the follow up as far as discipleship and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and they're not going into a place that is going to be talking them into an abortion, so you have time.
Yeah.
You have time to share the gospel
Yeah, exactly.
after they're done with the ultrasound.
Yeah.
You may not have that if they walk into the Planned Parenthood or into any abortion center
Yeah.
because they may be talked into immediately.
Yeah,
killing
absolutely.
the baby.
And having a good relationship with your pregnancy center, even in spite of differences, can really go a long way. So that when you're out there standing in front of the Planned Parenthood and you've got a young lady who's abortion minded, who's considering going to that place, if you can call ahead, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
it goes a long way to just kind of that handoff process to let her know
Right.
they're waiting on you.
Right.
You know, they're
Yeah.
expecting you. Some pregnancy centers are a little weird where they might want to talk to her before they set any kind of appointment, which is fine. Maybe you can hand the phone to her or whatever. But calling ahead is helpful, and it does help if you have a relationship. We've got kind of an end with all the pregnancy centers around here
Yeah.
where we know the directors and stuff. We can get on the phone with them directly
Yeah.
and say, we've got somebody coming. Can you make room?
Yeah.
And so, again, that goes a long way, that relationship
Yeah,
does.
absolutely. And that's really an important resource.
Yeah.
So women coming for Pap smears, STD testing, or other health issues. We've talked specifically about kind of the birth control issues, but they come for other health issues as well. And this is women, not men yet. We'll get to that last. But so again, we use a lot of the same strategies,
Yeah.
speaking to them as we've already mentioned.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I don't think there's a whole lot more to say about that one.
Yeah.
Except, there are some pregnancy centers. Actually, one of the ones here, actually, a couple of the ones here in Charlotte, the pro-life pregnancy centers do STD testing and stuff like that.
Okay, that's good to know.
So that's good to
Yeah.
know. It's good to
Yeah.
know if you have a good relationship with your pregnancy center, you know the stuff that they offer, and you can point these women in the right direction. But many of the pregnancy centers won't do like a Pap smear and stuff like that. But there are places that will. There
Yeah.
are community centers that, they're not gospel centered. They're just government entities, some of them.
Right.
Some of them are,
Right.
nonprofits or whatever. But they're far better than Planned Parenthood.
Exactly. They're not doing abortions.
Yeah.
That's the critical key point. If you
Exactly.
can get them someplace that doesn't do abortions, you've got a shot at continuing to disciple her and
Yeah.
have that baby continue to be
Yeah.
safe if she's pregnant.
And I would say if you're seeing patterns, like you're out there reaching out on a regular basis and you're seeing patterns of people that are coming for Pap smears or STD testing or whatever,
Yeah.
then the things that you see a pattern of,
Yeah.
then compile a list of resources for that particular thing. So again, you're seeing people coming on a regular basis for STD testing.
Right.
Get a list of 3 or 4 places
Yeah.
that do that, so you can point them in that direction. Hand them that list. Maybe
Right.
again, it's a compiled list of all the resources that you've compiled. I'd say the best you can, not to just overwhelm them with so much stuff,
Yeah.
is good. But
Yeah.
just a little pamphlet or something like that, you can hand them. It gives them directions to the place to get them away from there. Can be really helpful. Getting them away from going in to a place that kills children for money.
Yeah, yeah. So the last major group, which was the one that kind of sparked this whole podcast for me, because I was kind of lost in how do I respond to this, was a young man who, there were a few. This happened several times, but the one in particular, it was a young man going in and then coming out. In both cases, I didn't realize it was a man until he was close. I thought it was a woman.
Yeah.
Because this was someone transitioning, a transgender person who I called out and said, "Hey, we can help you," thinking it's a woman. And as he approaches, he said, "I don't think you can help me with my issues."
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, it's a man, and he said, I'm here for hormone therapy."
Yeah.
And so I just really kind of was at a loss. I had never dealt with that, never. That was my first time.
Yeah.
And what I did do was just instantly, this is where I always go, is I talked about that we were all loved because we are all created in the image of a holy God,
Yeah.
and focusing on the image of God, and shared the gospel. He was not terribly receptive. He got back in his car and said, Planned Parenthood really understands LGBTQ people
Yeah.
and transgender people. And that really struck me. First of all, his clear unhappiness. And I thought after he had left, I should have said something like, "Are you content?" And because I do know enough about the transgender movement that these people have a very, very high rate of suicide, very unhappy, they're never at home
Yeah.
in even following surgery. And the doctor friend that was with me, in fact, verified that. She said that her son is a doctor at Johns Hopkins, and they had studied and done the surgical intervention for people transitioning from one gender to another for 20 years. And they did all kinds of research during that time and found that the suicide rate prior to the surgery is about 40%. It's really high.
Yeah.
And then they did 20 years of study of these people following the surgery, and the suicide rate was unchanged.
Yeah.
So they stopped doing them because they said, what are we doing? We're doing these very disfiguring, irreversible surgeries with all the risks involved. And it's not helping.
Yeah.
They're still suicidal. So so that says a lot. But when I did some research on this, I really found that the church maybe is not responding as well as it should or could be. It can be very condemning.
Sure.
Without understanding. So we just wanted to give you all, and we have an article that is accompanying this podcast, and we've put some links on maybe some ways that you can gracefully and graciously approach this issue. But one of the things in listening to people who came out of the transgender movement, started off, maybe even did the surgery, and I did hear a podcast with one of those women speaking who had been transgendered as a man for 9 years. And what brought her back was the gospel.
Wow.
And she said, despite all the anger and hatred that she expressed to her mother or others who tried to keep pointing her back to her identity in Christ, and the importance of that and the truth of the gospel, she said, you may think you're not making an impact, because she said she would just scream and storm away.
Yeah.
But she said those words never left. The word of God does not return void. And she said, don't abandon the gospel. But she gave some advice in kind of some strategies so that gospel could be more easily received.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I think I wrote down some of what those main points are. One of them was really that you first listen, just listen, understand their world, because these people are very largely in significant pain, and if they don't feel you truly understand the pain that they're in, that you can't just introduce, well, God can change everything and, just, grow up or whatever.
Yeah.
That is not going to be well received, and they're going to reject it.
Yeah.
So listen. And then I think you were the one, Daniel, that suggested some of the things that we wrote down as kind of bullet points on some things you could say. Like I didn't even realize the risks of hormone therapy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think pointing them to resources that can speak the truth. And this is from the Mayo Clinic, this link that you actually have in the article here. And we're not going to expound too much on this, guys, because you can get the article on sidewalksforlife.com.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, talking about how there's risks involved with this hormone therapy. I mean, people think that they're doing the best because, after all, we're trying to affirm. That's a word that folks that push this movement always use, is affirming, want to be affirming.
Yeah.
But if you're affirming someone and doing something that's destructive to them, then you're not being helpful. That's like, best example I can think of off the top of my head, if somebody, you're at the bar, which you wouldn't be if you're a Christian, but before you were a Christian, at the bar with one of your friends, he's had a little too much to drink, or he or she walk into the door of the bar with their keys in their hand. Are you going to affirm that? You want to affirm them, right? Hey, you could pat them on the back. Hey, you're a good driver.
And they're saying, I feel fine.
Yeah.
I can drive. I'm perfectly fine. So their feelings are saying, I can do this.
Right. Don't judge me. After all, aren't you supposed to? I mean, if you're my friend, would you judge me?
Yeah.
Would you? Wouldn't you want me to feel like I want to feel in my own body?
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes affirmation of destructive behavior is actually involvement in that destructive behavior. We need to speak out against it. We can do it graciously, and we can do it with with the grace of God.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't affirm things that are destructive to people. Anyway, this article in the Mayo Clinic on the mayoclinic.org website will talk about that.
Right.
And there's other articles. There's a testimony we have a link to on this article that you should be able to just watch this testimony. Testimonies are powerful in any area.
Yeah.
I always encourage you, if you have a testimony, maybe you know a friend who was a transgender person and got saved and God turned their life right side up. Share that testimony. Maybe you're a person like that, or maybe this testimony that we have listed here. And there's other testimonies of people that have gone through that, and the Lord just turned their life right side up.
Yeah.
Share those testimonies.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I would say ministering to these people the gospel is the most important thing.
It really is. And the case study that I heard on the link that I gave you, that was what she said. That was what turned everything around.
Yeah.
For her and it took 9 years, and she went through all the surgeries, and she made the point that she awoke from the surgery thinking you kept having to go more and more extreme in how to deal with the gender dysphoria, and she kept thinking this next step is first hormone therapy, and then I'll feel better. And then when she didn't, she said, well, now the surgeries, and then I'll feel better. And she woke up from the surgery, and it was almost instantaneous. She said, I feel the same.
Yeah.
I'm not, this is not right. I'm not who I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And ultimately came to what I loved the line. She said, finding her identity in Christ, because this is an identity. It's sexual identity, but it's your identity. Where does that lie? And ultimately, it lies in Christ and Christ alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, guys, we hope this podcast was a blessing to you. We hope it equipped you guys to be an effective voice with people who are not necessarily abortion-minded, so that you can focus on those who are abortion-minded. Of course, we've done many podcasts about that. We'll continue to do podcasts about that. And we may even, at some point in the future, break down some of these subjects individually and do separate podcasts about them. But for now, we just hope this will be a blessing to you guys. As always, you can reach out to me, Daniel, at lovelife.org. You can reach out to her, Vicky, at lovelife.org. Check out our Sidewalks for Life website. This article should be up as this podcast comes out. And I think it'll be a blessing to you guys with some of those links that we talked about. And I think until next time, we'll wrap this thing up. And God bless.
Give me an outlet for love. Give me an outlet for gratitude. I know it will cost me my life, but nothing's too precious since I met you.